6 days left to go. Is it enough time for Alexander Isak to get his move away from Newcastle, or will he stay put? It's dominated the window, and it looks set to continue to do so.
We want clarity, we want to move forward.
It's a cloud over the club constantly.
The best thing for him is, I think for everybody, is if he can leave.
And there's no intentional dig to Alex, but naturally I want players that are committed to Newcastle.
Not for sale. Wolves' stance is clear to Newcastle, whose bid of £50 million for Jørgen Strand Larsen is rejected. Will they go in again or look elsewhere? Rasmus Hojlund's exit at Manchester United is moving closer, with Napoli in pole position to sign him. And it's been a summer dominated by teams wanting a striker. Could Nicolas Jackson end up at Bayern Munich, or will a Premier League club come in for him late on? Right, loads to get through. Very good morning to you. Well, good morning to James Savundra as well. 6 days, as I said, remain in this summer transfer window. And Alexander Isak is still very much top of the agenda. Newcastle directors Jamie Rubin and Jacobo Solis visited Isak's home yesterday before the game with Newcastle to hold talks about the striker's future. It remains up in the air, and less than a week of the transfer window remaining. Once again, Eddie Howe was quizzed on Isak after last night's game.
That's the ideal from everyone. Our side, Newcastle side, is we want clarity, we want to move forward, we want the sort of narrative to change, because we're in the start of the season now. We're into the action, and we've got to get results, and we've got to try and focus on what we can control. No, there's no intentional dig to Alex, but naturally I want players that are committed to Newcastle. That's one of the most important qualities when you put a team out on the pitch, that they show. So that's no dig to anybody. That's just every manager will feel the same way.
There'll be so many people outside of Newcastle telling Newcastle and Eddie Howe what they have to do. You've got to be strong. You've got to show that Liverpool or any other club. You've got to show in the future that players can't just come in and demand to go. But they don't have the problem of Isak every day. They don't have the problem Eddie Howe has of every press conference going in there and getting asked questions about it. It's a cloud over the club constantly.
In an ideal world, the best thing for him is, I think for everybody, is if he can leave. But I also do believe that when someone makes a mistake, if it sees as a mistake after from his dressing room, if he apologizes, then we can move on.
We had this with Fernando Torres at Liverpool, where he didn't really want to be at the club. He ended up staying, and we got rid of him, not got rid of him, but we sold him in the January. Isak is a player who wants to win the Champions League.
Newcastle want to get there as well, don't they?
But they're not there now. When we were going for the Champions League at Liverpool, we had some world-class players. As soon as our level dropped, people like Torres, world-class player, Mascherano, world-class player, Xabi Alonso, world-class player, wanted to leave because there's too much of a gap between where they are as players and where the club are.
OK, let's get a Liverpool perspective then on this Isak saga. We can cross live to Anfield this morning. Delighted to say we can speak to our reporter, Peter Stevenson. Morning, Peter. The Isak saga is going to run and run, but could it potentially ramp up a bit now that they've got the game out of the way, they've played each other? Is there a feeling that Liverpool may just go in and make another offer before the window closes?
Well, you know, they say in football, timing is everything, and I suspect the view from Liverpool today will be, yes, we've come away from the North East last night with a memorable win and 3 points that keep us at the top of the Premier League along with Arsenal and Tottenham. But now the dust has settled in the cold light of day, what realistically is their next move? And I just wonder whether they're just going to play a patient waiting game. I think what they'll want to know is what the outcome of those talks were between the Newcastle hierarchy and Isak yesterday. That will be critical because if that still shows the player has an intention to leave Newcastle, Liverpool you imagine will feel encouraged in going in with a better offer. If the signals coming out of the northeast are that the player, if you like, has been persuaded, and there's been subtly suggested that he stays at Newcastle, and all manner of options might have made open to him. We don't know the result of those talks, but we'll soon find out. And you would imagine with Eddie Howe desperate for clarity, you have to feel sorry for the guy. I mean, he's had injuries to contend with last night, a suspension, a big defeat at home in front of a passionate crowd. So yeah, the hostility was made very clear to Liverpool last night, but that won't bother them. What will bother them is those talks the player is having directly with the Newcastle hierarchy, and that will be key to determining what happens. But it could be a very long and a very interesting week.
Jamie Carragher last night was critical of Ibrahima Konate's performance in defence. And has this highlighted once again the need to strengthen in that position? Could Liverpool put a bid in for Mike Gay, for example?
Well, you would have thought that has got to be a priority. You look at the evidence before you. They've beaten Bournemouth 4-2. They've beaten Newcastle 3-2. They've conceded 2 goals in 2 games. Now, I heard on the radio this morning coming in, Liverpool didn't concede 2 goals in a Premier League game till October last season in winning the title. So clearly something isn't just right. That dynamic between the 2 centre-halves and the goalkeeper, especially at set pieces, isn't just right. You look at the way that Bruno sneaked in at the back post for that first header. You looked at the ball over the top for the second Newcastle goal. Very reminiscent of a goal scored here by Bournemouth at the start of the season. So that's clearly an issue. And you look at Arsenal coming to town here on Sunday. You look at the way they play from set pieces. You look at the goals they've already scored from set pieces. That could be very interesting. And if a decision hasn't been made by the weekend, you would imagine that certainly that game against Arsenal will flag up yet again that maybe that is a key area. For some reason, it's not just working. Konate just hasn't found his rhythm yet. Maybe Arne Slot is prepared to give him a bit more time. We'll have to wait and see.
Can't really leave you, Peter, without asking about probably what was the biggest story of last night. That was the match winner. It seems already in this Premier League season we're talking about very young child prodigies, and we've seen another one in Rio Ngumoha.
Yeah, young Rio did really well, didn't he? I mean, he came on. I mean, I think most people have probably thought this game's gonna, it's heading for a 2-2 draw, which would have been a remarkable match in itself. But that final act in what was an absorbing football drama last night. I mean, coming on, by all accounts, he's done well in pre-season. He's scored 3 goals, so I don't think the Liverpool management would have been particularly surprised or worried about throwing him on. But to get that magical moment when that ball comes to you, and I mean the composure in such a cauldron to actually take that ball first time. He had time to take a touch. Let's face it, he could have taken a touch and weighed up the options, but just to hit it first time, I don't think Nick Pope actually moved. And that ball nestled in the corner of the net. Game over. A remarkable appearance from him, and we're going to have to wait and see. There could be a couple of very, very promising young teenagers, maybe on the bench on Sunday, but certainly, as you say, the youngsters showing that you're never too young to get your chance, and he looks a class act, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. It was a great game and a great finish. Thank you very much, Peter. Right, Jeff Hendrick will be joining us, formerly of Newcastle and Burnley, of course. Interesting to get his take on the Isak situation, but you're holding the show, mate, up until that point. Now that Newcastle and Liverpool have played each other, was it always unlikely that anything was going to happen before that point? Do we expect things, if anything's to happen, it's going to happen now, in the next couple of days?
You would think so, though. The fact that Alexander Isak has been training on his own for such a long period of time, even if he moved to Liverpool over the course of the last few days, he probably wouldn't have featured. But we will get some form of clarity, definitely, over the course of the next few days, because we have the transfer deadline in 6 days' time. Newcastle's stance remains the same, though, that Alexander Isak is not for sale, and they value him at £150 million. However, at the same time, Liverpool are still looking to sign an attacking player before the transfer deadline. They still feel like they're one short on where they were last season. And at the same time as that, Newcastle are actively looking to sign strikers in this transfer window. Yes, they need to replace Callum Wilson, but they also may need to replace Alexander Isak. So there is a chance that things do move if Newcastle are able to line up 2 suitable strikers over the course of the next 6 days and Liverpool lodge what they deem to be an acceptable offer. It's been reported, and we can report it now ourselves, that Newcastle officials met Alexander Isak yesterday. They visited him at his home as they attempted to convince him to stay at the club. And a new contract would be part of discussions if he was to stay at Newcastle. Newcastle are already in a really good situation because Isak has 3 years left in his contract, but they may find a way to convince him to stay in the Champions League with Newcastle this season, maybe increase his options when it comes to his personal terms. I think he'd get a bumped up contract if he was to stay at Newcastle and commit his future to the club. Eddie Howe wasn't aware of those conversations taking place, but we can confirm that was the case. But I think the fact that Newcastle have struggled to line up a replacement for Callum Wilson, who departed at the end of June, just shows that it's going to be very difficult for Newcastle to get 2 replacements in for Isak and Wilson over the course of the next few days. So it does feel like a lot needs to happen if Liverpool are to get Alexander Isak. But of course, as we know, in the final few days of a transfer window, things do accelerate. There's more compromise from different parties. They try to get deals done. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but a lot needs to happen for this man to be wearing the red shirt of Liverpool next week.
And obviously, Newcastle need Isak. Everyone knows that, of course. But when you look at the first 2 games of the season, they've only got 1 point. And the amount of chances that they've had, they play some really good football, really good build-up play. Has that just highlighted how much they need to keep hold of him?
That'll be the real frustration. They've had 2 really tough games to start the season. Aston Villa away, Liverpool, the champions, at home, but just 1 point. But already they're severely depleted when it comes to strike options. If everybody was available, even if Alexander Isak was available, you'd think they need another striker. Anthony Gordon, who's been playing as a central striker, he's now out for the next 3 matches. So it means heading into the game this weekend against Leeds, the main strike option, the only strike option, is William Asula, who now has 2 Premier League goals. He got his 2nd Premier League goal yesterday. He's the only recognised forward option for the next 3 matches. Joel Linton, who was converted from a striker to a midfielder by Steve Bruce, he can't even reprise that old role because it looks like he's injured now as well. Sandro Tonali may be missing this weekend. Fabian Schär could be missing the game due to suspension. And so you look at that lineup there, they'll just be pleased they have slightly more depth in the midfield and defensive areas now. When it comes to strike options, they really, really are thin on the ground. And that'll be the disappointment for Eddie Howe. The fact is, there was so much excitement heading into this season. Yes, they've done well in terms of recruitment in midfield and defence and goalkeeper, actually. But in terms of their strike options, they are severely lacking for 2 fairly winnable games against Leeds and Wolves in the next few weeks.
Right, I'm going to interrupt you there because we've got some very interesting breaking news concerning Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have approached Manchester City about signing Manuel Akanji. Palace are looking for a centre-back in case Mark Gay leaves in the next 6 days. Gay has a year left on his contract and Palace are prepared to sell him to Liverpool if the price is right. City signed Akanji for £15 million from Borussia Dortmund 3 years ago. Galatasaray have also held initial talks about signing him. Wow, this is interesting stuff, isn't it? It sounds like Palace are getting ready for Mark Gay to leave.
They're already in a situation, Crystal Palace, where they only have 3 frontline centre-backs who are fit and ready to play. And we saw last week in the Conference League that Jefferson Lerma, who's a midfielder, played at centre-back to give Chris Richards a few minutes off. And this would be the sort of signing which definitely would excite Crystal Palace fans. Not excite, you're never that excited when you sign a defender, but I think it would encourage them, the fact they are planning for life after Mark Gay. Let's bear in mind, even if Mark Gay stays by the end of this deadline, it seems unlikely he's going to sign a new contract at the club. So they do need to have some forward planning there when Gay eventually departs, whether it's now or next summer, because it does feel like with the options on the table for Mark Gay, him staying at Crystal Palace seems the most unlikely of those. And it was my understanding in the last few days that if Mark Gay was to depart, they'd look to sign a Premier League-ready replacement rather than a young player. And Akanji fits the bill with that. He's got the ability to play in a number of different positions. He can slot into midfield as well. Clearly, mainly used as a centre-back. He could play as a right-back if required, but clearly Palace play with right wing-back, so he's unlikely to be used there. But for Crystal Palace, they do need to really appease their manager right now. He was saying before Eza departed that they needed at least 2 players in this transfer window. Clearly, that's now 3. Eza's departed. That'll be 4 if Mark Gay is to depart the football club. So a lot of work to be done. And for Crystal Palace, they have been criticised for being slow in the market. They've been accused of being passive by their own manager, Oliver Glasner. And bear in mind what he's done at the football club over the course of the last 18 months. You really want to keep this man happy because Last deadline day last summer, they signed 4 players on deadline day. I was there. It took a long period of time for them to get their act together, and it took them until their 9th league game to win a game. So they don't want to be on the back foot once again. They've had an encouraging start to the season, won the Community Shield, 2 points in their first 2 matches, but they do need to make sure, if and when these big names depart, there are big names lined up to replace them. Manuel Akanji, who's won the treble with Manchester City, seems out of favour right now with the number of centre-backs City have right now, that he could be the man to fit the bill.
You don't get excited by defensive signings?
If they're wing-backs, you do. It's centre-backs, you don't get excited, do you? It's the forward players.
That's a good
but
one,
you need
yeah.
defenders to win leagues.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very true. Right. Meanwhile, Newcastle have been trying to find a replacement for Callum Wilson, as James said, who left at the end of last season. Bad news, though. Their attempts to do a deal with Wolves for the striker Jørgen Strand Larsen have failed so far. Fill us in on that. What's happened over the last 24 hours?
So Wolves have rejected a bid worth around £50 million from Newcastle for Jørgen Strand Larsen. Their position is he's not for sale. They think he's too important, way too important to this team, and the lack of time left in the window means it's going to be very difficult to find a suitable Premier League ready replacement for Strand Larsen. Let's bear in mind he scored 14 goals last season whilst he was on loan, and Wolves signed him permanently earlier on this summer for £23 million. As part of that deal, they met certain clauses in the contract which meant they had to make that deal permanent. I think they were delighted to make that deal permanent. Bear in mind what he did last season for that fee. He's got a 4-year contract at the club, and when you consider some of the departures at Wolves already this summer, and when you consider their starts of the season, you can understand why they do not want to let this player go when we're 2 games into this Premier League campaign.
Yeah, but they've made 23 million on him in the off-season, which is quite extraordinary.
It is, but that price was set last summer. So as part of the deal to bring him to the football club on loan, that was the set price. They could buy him for 23 million if certain conditions were met. So that price was set. But when you look at what's happened this summer when it comes to players moving for big money, he scored 14 goals in the league last season. Hugo Ekitike scored 15. Benjamin Sesko scored 13 last season in the Bundesliga. Both deals could go upward of £70 million. So you can understand why Wolves would be wanting a similar sort of money. I'm not saying that they're the same level of players, but when you look at the goal record, they are a similar level because they're proven goal scorers. He's done it in the Premier League. But I think you can understand why Wolves do not want to let him go because they're not in a great place right now. If they let him go, then it feels like chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like you've got to play minimum 50 million now for a striker if you want to get a decent one. Now, where does that leave Yoane Wissa, though? Is a move to Newcastle off? Well, Brentford boss Keith Andrews doesn't expect Wissa to leave.
As far as I'm concerned, there's been no movement in any way and fully expect Jan to be here come next Tuesday. My stance hasn't really changed from day one of when I took over. I knew there was or would be interest in Jan. Naturally, when you score that amount of Premier League goals and you play as well as he did last season in particular, and he's built his career at this football club over the last 4 years where he's grown in stature, presence, not surprised by it. And yeah, I haven't really changed throughout the whole time. I've been pretty consistent with my message around it, and it's not just because there's cameras here, it's how I genuinely feel.
OK, stay with us. Jeff Hendrick will be in the studio, and a reminder of the breaking news. Crystal Palace have approached Manchester City about signing Manuel Akanji. Loads more still to come, including news out of North London. After the break, we'll be discussing potential incomings for Arsenal.
It was amazing, yeah. I think I had a bit of everything. But then for the Newcastle version of it, it was like just the atmosphere, the way the players just gave it everything, going down to 10 men, backs against the walls, to come back into the game and probably could have won it. And then just the disappointment of losing and then losing their players as well. It's going to be really tough for them.
Yeah, we're going to get more thoughts of yours on Newcastle and Isak in the next part, but I want to move it on to Nicolas Jackson at the moment, because Nicolas Jackson can leave Chelsea this summer, and with less than a week to go in the window, it appears that interest in the forward is rising, James. So who are the clubs that could sign him, and are Newcastle in the mix?
We know that Newcastle want to potentially sign 2 strikers before the transfer deadline, especially if Isak was to depart. So you can understand him being a player that would fit the bill. Bayern Munich are one of at least 5 clubs that want to sign Nicolas Jackson before Monday's deadline. Chelsea would prefer to do a permanent deal, but clubs like Bayern Munich and a number of clubs, because of the finances involved, would prefer a loan deal. But we understand that Chelsea would only let Jackson leave on loan if there was an obligation to buy him next summer. And we know the sort of figures that Chelsea are looking at right now when you consider the amount that Sesko has gone for, what Ekitike has gone for. They're looking for upwards of £70 million for a player who scored 24 league goals in 2 seasons at Chelsea. It's definitely been a successful 2 years. Clearly, he's now third in the pecking order now. But Aston Villa, Newcastle and Liverpool are clubs looking for a striker right now. I'm not saying Liverpool want to sign Nicolas Jackson. They want to sign an attacking player. And he's definitely somebody who's a proven goal scorer in the Premier League, that you can understand why teams as good as Bayern Munich want to try and sign him this summer.
All right, Jeff, of those 3 teams, Aston Villa, Newcastle and Liverpool, who we don't think are looking at Jackson just yet, but they might be, where would he be the best fit, do you think?
For me personally, I'd say Newcastle. Like you said, they need two strikers in. I think he fits the bill for them. You know, he scores goals, he's quick, and he's got a great manager who will help his game come along. So I don't see why he wouldn't be looking at Newcastle thinking I can kick on and really help that club. There's Champions League football as well. So I think it'd be a great fit for him.
He scores goals, doesn't he? He scores Premier League goals. That's certainly proven. Arsenal, believe it or not, are very much still in the market to strengthen their squad. Could Piero Hincapié be on his way to the Emirates? Bring us up to speed.
Well, Arsenal are exploring a deal to try to sign the Bayer Leverkusen centre-back. Arsenal's focus clearly is on departure still. They've spent around £250 million this summer. It's been an incredible summer for Arsenal, but they want to be in a position to act and try to sign this left centre-back. He's got 4 years left in his deal at Bayer Leverkusen. They clearly want to keep him. Erik ten Hag is the manager there right now. They've lost so many key players already this summer, many of them heading to the Premier League, the likes of Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong and Granit Xhaka. But Sky in Germany are reporting that the player wants to go to Arsenal and he's got a £52 million release clause in his contract. And clearly if Arsenal get to that money, then Bayer Leverkusen can't stand in his way if he wants to go and that clause is met in the contract. So it's something that Arsenal are looking at right now. I'm not sure whether or not it will 100% happen, because clearly Arsenal have to balance their spending with outgoings. And sadly for Arsenal, over the course of a number of years, they've not been great when it's come to player sales. This summer alone, they've brought in about £10 million in terms of departures. A number of first-team players departed for free in the summer. So it's a deal which Arsenal see as a great market opportunity, but there's work to be done for them to be in a position where they can make this happen whilst remaining compliant when it comes to profit and sustainability.
But Arsenal, they have the best defence in the league. I know he's got a lot of pedigree in Hincapié, but do they need him?
That's the big question, I think, when it's do they need him? They've obviously got Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori can play there, Ben White can play there. So, you know, probably they don't need him, but with all the fixtures, maybe looking at previous years, you know, injuries at key points of the season, possibly they just want to build the strongest squad they can and have everyone in the building. So maybe it's a tiny bit greedy going in for him, but, you know, it could work out well and they might need him down the road.
Do you think arguably now, even without Hincapié coming in, Arsenal have the best strength in depth in the Premier League in the squad?
It looks that way, yeah. You know, even the weekend there, they picked up a couple of injuries and it doesn't look too daunting for them. They've Eze to come in. They've players who can come in and fill them voids now. So they're looking really, really strong. Maybe with another signing, even stronger. And I don't fear for them getting a couple of injuries now. I think they can just kick on and keep getting results.
Yeah, suspect they will sell some players though before the end of the window, that's for sure, just to try and balance the books a bit. Now, there's already been plenty of movement between Serie A and the Premier League this summer. We'll be joined by Mina Rzouki after the break as Manchester United's Rasmus Hojlund edges closer to a move to Napoli. Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Delighted to be joined by Italian football expert Mina Rzouki now to go through a few potential deals. Good morning, Mina. Let's start with Rasmus Hojlund, shall we? Because he's wanted by Napoli and it looks like it could be getting close. But is it going to take a significant investment to get him there?
It is very close and it is a significant investment, but it's one that Antonio Conte has been so strong about because obviously he lost Kvaratskhelia and he wasn't adequately replaced. So it caused a little bit of tension at the time with between Conte and the Napoli ownership. So he's put his foot down. He's lost Romelu Lukaku for at least 3 months and he's only been left with Lorenzo Luca. So he desperately needs a striker up front and Hojlund fits the bill. It would be a 5 million loan deal approximately, and then 40 million to purchase the player outright after that. Of course, the deal hinges on whether or not everyone is happy with the fact that this is without an obligation to buy. So I think that Hojlund was a little bit upset about that. He wants to know that his future is clear and that if he does well enough, that he can stay. And I think that looks like it's being resolved right now. So he will be purchased outright if certain appearances or obligations are met. Then he will be a Napoli player for the future.
Okay, interesting stuff. So Hojlund, one of the players that Manchester United would be happy to leave in the summer. Jadon Sancho, of course, is another one. Now, it looked like a move to Roma might happen. Then we heard that Sancho himself wasn't particularly happy with the move. Is this something that could be revived?
Well, it looks so, because Roma director Frederic Massara is in London right now, and he's going to meet with Jadon Sancho, as well as Chelsea winger Tyreek George. So this is the player, they actually share the same agent. So there's been a bit of a weird thing going on with Roma, because Massara, the director, has said that there's no motivation on behalf of Jadon Sancho to really push this deal forward and try to make the move happen to Roma. Now, Gasperini, who was the coach of Roma at the time, said, well, he didn't say no to us, so he didn't reject Roma. This deal, there is still a possibility for it. So you don't know who to believe. He didn't actually say no, but he's not really doing much to push the deal forward either. So in order to resolve this all, Frederic Massara is in London today. He will meet with Jadon Sancho to try to see whether a move can happen. If not, then he will try to make moves for the Chelsea young winger. So let's see what happens there. But Sancho has got to want to really go there, because I think that if he goes and then plays under Gasperini, this could be a great move for him, akin to something of what McTominay's experienced at Napoli under Conte.
How about this story then? This one's fascinating, isn't it? If this ends up happening, Jamie Vardy could end up being the second oldest player in Serie A behind Luka Modric. He's a free agent. Could he really end up at Cremonese?
I mean, listen, this one shocked me too, but it's Di Marzio who reported it first, and he's got the great connections, in all honesty. I would be shocked if this happens. Cremonese are working with a very tight budget. They were the last team to be promoted into Serie A. They are looking for a striker, and obviously he fits the bill that he can produce a lot. I love that Italian media at the time noted the fact that he did his best work under Claudio Ranieri. So, of course, he would want to work with another Italian coach. But Cremonese have Davide Nicolas as coach. And this is a man who's really famed for keeping teams in Serie A and avoiding the drop, but not necessarily one that you would probably move to if you want a whole project ahead of you. But is that what Vardy wants? I'm not entirely sure. They desperately want him. Whether or not he agrees to the situation remains to be seen.
All right, well, just I mentioned there about him being the second oldest player in Serie A if he goes. There's the graphic for you. So Luka Modric, 39 years, 11 months. Jamie Vardy, if he goes to Cremonese, 38 years and 7 months. That is staggering, isn't it? Right, let's move it on to someone who's a bit younger. I want to get your take on the situation around the Italian goalkeeper, Gianluigi Donnarumma. He will leave PSG. The question is, where will he go?
It's going to be Manchester City. That is the team that has been involved with him and actually has always shown an interest, at least 2 months ago when we first started talking about Donnarumma possibly leaving PSG and the fact that his deal was not going to be, it's not going to go the way that he wanted it to. But of course, City have problems in the sense that they've got to sell off Edison in order to free up some money if they are to bring in Donnarumma. PSG initially wanted quite a vast amount of money for him, around the 50 million, but now obviously they understand that the situation has changed. They will accept something of 30 million. And Donnarumma really does want to go to the Premier League and really does want to play under Pep Guardiola. Whether or not the deal, it's really hinges on whether or not Edison moves to Galatasaray. So we have to see what Galatasaray do. And then if they do move for Edison, then Donnarumma will come and take his place. And it's an interesting one because of Trafford being there as well, and whether or not Donnarumma is exactly the right profile as a goalkeeper for a Guardiola side. But if this does happen, then it's quite remarkable the trajectory of this goalkeeper's career.
Brilliant talking to you as ever. Mina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, OK, I think we should move this back to Alexander Isak, shouldn't we? Because we've got a former Newcastle player with us in the studio, and you missed our chat in part one. We mentioned the fact that two of the co-owners had gone to Isak's house before the Liverpool game. We don't quite know what they spoke about, but I presume they're still trying to convince him to stay. In light of that, and given that time is ticking, do you think that with every day that goes by, he's more and more likely to stay at Newcastle?
Yeah, like you said, there's probably not the replacements there. I know they want 2 strikers maybe in, especially with Gordon getting suspended last night. It's going to be really difficult for them to get not just players in, but the players they want that suits their squad, the mould, the player that Eddie Howe wants. So it's going to be really tough. And for me, watching the game last night, I'm sure Isak was watching it, seeing the atmosphere, seeing his teammates put in that effort and really should have beat Liverpool. You know, he might look at it and think, if I was there, we could have won the game. So potentially, with time running out, he might end up staying. He's going to have to ask for forgiveness at the end of the day. But I think if he gets himself fit and on the pitch and puts in displays like he did last year, it'll be all forgotten in a few months' time.
Yeah, absolutely. Any owners ever turned up at your house and convinced you to stay?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't in the situation where I was probably wanted as much as Isak, but I wish I was sort of, in the driving seat like him and wanted by so many clubs. But for me, he's running out of time, and I think he should make a decision, really. I think it's up to him and the club. They've had that big meeting yesterday, and I think there is time for him to just turn it around.
From a Liverpool point of view, though, do you agree with what Jamie Carragher said yesterday? And initially, when we heard that Isak was of interest to Liverpool, a lot of people said, well, do they need him? They've got so much firepower. But Carragher looked at the bench yesterday and said, I think they need more attacking reinforcements because they had Harvey Elliott, Ngumoha and Federico Chiesa on the bench. So do you actually agree with Carragher that Liverpool could do with an attacking reinforcement?
Well, who they brought on won the game for them.
That's true.
But no, of course they do. I think we said about Arsenal earlier, and they're assembling a squad where if anything happens, whether it's injuries or suspensions, they have people who can fill in. Liverpool are still a little bit short in that department up top, maybe at the back as well. And Newcastle certainly are as well. So I think both clubs would like Isak. We can't clone him and one be at each club. But they definitely need another striker in or a winger.
Well, the closest thing to the clone is at Liverpool already, and that's Ugo Ekitike, isn't it? We saw that fascinating comparison on Monday Night Football last night. Will Isak be a Newcastle or Liverpool player then, come September the 1st?
I honestly think Newcastle, yeah. I think maybe they've had vital talks yesterday, time's running out, can't get the players in that Eddie actually wants in the club. So I think they'll have to, like I've said before, kiss and make up and get them back on the pitch.
James, this is your chance to alienate a fan base. Will he be a Newcastle or a Liverpool
I think
player?
he'd be a Newcastle player simply because Newcastle find it so hard to find replacements for Alexander Isak. That's the only thing. And they don't want to be in a situation where they're paying way over the odds for a player like Wissa or Strand Larsen because they've got the Isak money. So I think that Isak will stay. I think there may be a new contract. And we wait to visit it all again next summer.
Yeah, OK, right. I think we've got lots more to talk about. There's going to be a lot happening in the next 6 days of the transfer window, including potentially at Manchester United. We will have the latest. Will they sign a new goalkeeper? Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Time now for our transfer updates. Alexander Isak missed Newcastle's defeat to Liverpool on the Monday Night Football amid reports the club's owners met him at his house to try and convince him to stay. Wolves have rejected a £50 million bid from Newcastle for Jørgen Strand Larsen. Brentford boss Keith Andrews says he expects Johan Wissa to stay during this window. Arsenal are interested in a late move for the Bayer Leverkusen defender Pierre Hincapié. Manchester City's intention remains to keep Ederson and James Trafford as their goalkeepers beyond the deadline. Manchester United are advancing in talks with Royal Antwerp over the signing of goalkeeper Senet Lammens. Napoli feel they are advancing on a deal for Manchester United striker Rasmus Hojlund, with growing optimism that a move can be finalised this week. Real Betis are still pushing to do a deal for the Manchester United forward Antony. Bayern Munich are one of at least 5 clubs, including Aston Villa, who want to sign Nicolas Jackson. Everton have signed Tyler Dibbling from Southampton in a deal worth up to £42 million. Nottingham Forest are in talks to sign Strasbourg winger Dylan Bakwa. Crystal Palace are among the Premier League clubs to have asked about Conor Gallagher's situation. However, Atletico Madrid have no interest in loaning out the former Chelsea midfielder. Jamie Vardy is considering an offer from the Italian club Cremonese. It's one of a number of options on the table for him. Sturm Graz right back Max Johnston has agreed terms on a 4-year deal with Derby County. The Scotland international is due to travel to England today to undergo a medical. Don't forget, you can keep across all of the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. You can just scan the QR code on the screen for you there and it'll take you to where you need to be. Right, let's talk Manchester United, shall we? They're in the market for a new goalkeeper and a midfielder. And James, it looks like a new goalkeeper is closest to being done.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Senet Lammens, you mentioned that there in the transfer update. Talks are advancing now. A deal worth around £17.3 million. We're not expecting personal terms to be a problem with this deal. It's the payment structure which is under discussion right now. He was left out of Royal Antwerp's first team for their game at the weekend. They didn't want to risk this big deal for them. Whether or not he comes in and becomes United's number one, we'll wait to see. He's just 23 years of age. Clearly that the Belgian Premier League is a very different beast to the Premier League itself, but clearly United have an issue at the goalkeeper department. Donnarumma was felt as the one that could come in by Manchester United fans anyway and do a job, but clearly that's quite an expensive deal to do. And Kevin Hatchard spoke to us yesterday on Transfer Talk, and he said that Ruben Amorim has been monitoring this player even back when he was at Sporting. So it's clearly a player he likes. It's whether he likes him enough to put him into the first team straight away.
Jeff, what does this mean for Andre Onana? He left out of the 11 again on the weekend. He's fit now. He was on the bench. Do you think his future at Man United is possibly over?
Yeah, it's certainly looking that way. For him to be back fit and not in the starting lineup is a telltale sign. The manager, obviously, they're looking at another keeper, so yeah, the writing's on the walls a little bit for him.
Feel that way to you?
Feels that way because he missed a lot of pre-season. It would have been really interesting to see where he'd have been if he was fully fit and he was competing with Tom Heaton and Altay Bahindr, whether or not this was always Ruben Amorim's plan, fit or unfit. He would be going to the season with Bahindr as the number one, whilst looking to find another goalkeeper to compete for that position. Andre Onana has been a really disappointing 2 seasons at United. I think there was a lot of hope that he'd come in and the distribution would be good and the goalkeeping would be good, but he cost United in the Champions League in that first season. It was his errors that led them to going out of the Champions League. And last season, whilst there were some impressive moments, still there were constant issues that plagued him throughout his 2 years at United. I don't think Ruben Amorim clearly trusts him. I don't know whether anybody fully trusts Altay Bahindr, but clearly he thinks Bahindr, having trained this season, is a better option than Andre Onana. There's a feeling among some United fans that Tom Heaton, who's there right now, would be a better option than both of them.
But then, if that's the case, if he doesn't trust Onana or Bahindr, then surely you want to go out and get a guy who comes in as the number one, rather than a young guy who comes in to compete.
Yeah, if he doesn't trust the both of them, you're looking for another keeper. And while you're trying to get that other keeper, I'd be with the fans really, and I'd be saying, why not play Tom Heaton? I've personally played with him. I've seen how he prepares for games. He was brilliant for us at Burnley. The saves he'd made, the distribution. So for me, I'd like to see him get a chance, because I think since he's gone there, he's not really had a chance. He's been third choice, second choice, and he's had a fabulous career. So I'd like to see him get a chance, certainly if they don't bring in a keeper.
I think a lot of people thought when Tom Heaton went to Manchester United that it was just about having a nice contract to see out his career, and the fact that he'd just be happy to be a senior player. We've seen it at a number of clubs. The likes of Scott Carson has quite enjoyed having that leadership role. But whenever you hear from Tom Heaton, he wants to be playing football, and he's frustrated with the lack of minutes. I think he deserves an opportunity. I think he's been so brilliant in the Premier League. He's still got plenty to give. I think he's a reliable set of hands, and I think the United defenders would much rather have Tom Heaton there than maybe the other two goalkeepers.
But a lot of Man United fans you'll speak to say we need to get a midfielder as well. We need to get some more quality in midfield. So what should be the priority? Should it be the goalkeeper or a midfielder?
That's a really tough question, just because, like we said there, Tom Heaton is there, and I think he's more than capable to come in and put in great performances. But then again, in midfield as well, I think everyone's saying they need legs, they need more legs in there. And for me, you know, Kobbie Mainoo, you know, he's a rising star. He was brilliant breaking onto the scene, and he's just not really got a chance this season, definitely not. But I don't see why he wouldn't be capable to do the job that everyone's crying out for to be done.
Well, I was going to ask you about outgoings, actually, and within that, there was an interesting story in The Sun on Kobbie Mainoo.
Yeah, it's a really frustrating situation for Manchester United fans when you see academy graduates potentially depart the football club. You know, Alejandro Garnacho is probably likely to depart, but Kobbie Mainoo is a player who it feels isn't in favour under Ruben Amorim. There were a number of opportunities at the weekend where he thought maybe he could get Mainoo on into midfield, but he's not featured for a single minute so far. And at the back end of last season, we didn't see him a huge amount either. And I think there's an understanding the fact that he's been seen as Bruno Fernandes' deputy rather than a player who can play alongside Bruno Fernandes. Clearly, Bruno Fernandes, unless he suffers an injury or a severe lack in form, he's going to be playing centre midfield for Manchester United. So it does look like United would accept suitable offers or be willing to listen to suitable offers for Kobbie Mainoo, because clearly they're in a situation now where they want to spend even more money, but they're hampered by the bad business in the past and the inability to offload players for good money. We've seen that in this window already. Jadon Sancho, they can't find him a club. Rasmus Hojlund, that's not been easy so far. Anthony, who they signed for £80 million, they can't find a suitable offer for him. And this would represent pure profit if Kobbie Mainoo, an academy graduate, was to depart. But it would be with a heavy heart, and it would not be a popular decision amongst United fans.
Guys, thank you very much. But you will be back for Transfer Talk. We're back at 12. Good morning. Transfers returns tomorrow at 9 a.m. Dan Gosling will be our studio guest. As I mentioned, we are back, the three of us, at midday. We'll also speak to the South American football expert, Tim Vickery. And for a full roundup of all of the day's transfer news, the Transfer Show is on today at 4 p.m. Now, for a moment last night, Liverpool fans were cheering a new goal-scoring hero, 16-year-old Rio Ngumoha's 100th minute winner. We'll have more reaction to that in Sky Sports FC next.